Okay, we are live, and I am with the most wonderful Natalie Donna of the Dystopian Deep Dives podcast. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you, Roberta.
So we're gonna just talk a little bit about what's been going on in the Larry Ray trial. I've been in court every day for this trial. It's been the most extraordinary trial. And I just wanted to come on and give you a little update.
Yeah, so what happened in court today?
Well, I'm going to go backwards, but we've had two fantastic witnesses. One, Claudia Drury, who was the Sarah Lawrence student who lived in one of the many who lived in Sloanham 9, where Larry Ray, the father of Talia Ray, went directly from prison where he was doing a stint for a child custody dispute where he didn't hand over his children to his wife. He did 3 years. He went right from prison to Sarah Lawrence housing and moved into the dorm room of his daughter's best friend, Isabella Pollok, who's coming up on very similar charges in July. So what Larry Ray did was he accused you of some kind of slight. And Claudia Drury was made to believe that she really was part of a conspiracy to destroy Larry and hurt his family, and that she actually believed that she poisoned Larry in the hospital. And she testified to that. And to make amends, she prostituted herself to the tune of $2.5 million she handed over. And anything that she had was just either destroyed or taken by Larry Ray, including her cell phone, anything John gave her, sunglasses were destroyed. And we heard testimony from her that she was suffocated over and over again with a plastic bag by Larry Ray with Isabella Pollok present and tied up naked, thrown cold water on, and then he turned the air conditioning up and continued to suffocate her, strangle her with a leash. He took scissors and went at her like he was going to cut her face and then cut all her hair off. And during this testimony, I had just almost one of those visceral reactions where I thought I was going to just start loudly sobbing. It was so horrible. Yeah. But I was able to calm myself down and not have to eject myself from the courtroom. It's just very disturbing testimony. And you hear about her state of mind. This is a very intelligent woman, reduced to a life of living in hotels, prostituting herself. And then at the end, she got so desperate, Larry Ray insisted that she stop giving him money in drips and drabs. And drips and drabs were thousands of dollars, but that wasn't enough for him. So one time he challenged her to make $50,000 over a weekend. She couldn't do it, but she did do it in a week. But towards the end of her prostitution time, she was asking her clients for money. And we heard testimony from one of her clients came in, this very nebbish, bald guy. He was an editor at a journal. And he testified he gave her $120,000 in a very short period, I think less than a year. And at first, you're listening to this, and she told him she needed it for a lawsuit, that something her parents did, because she believed Larry Ray turned all these kids, I say kids, they were 19, 20 years old at the time of this, sophomores in college, and got, of course, isolated them, convinced them that their parents were terrible. And part of what she believed, yes, that her parents were in on this conspiracy. So.
Yeah, he convinced all of them that they had terrible childhoods, and whether or not that was true was secondary. I mean, this is sort of his MO, where he would convince these kids like they had done something wrong. You know, he convinced them all that they were suicidal. it's all the same tactics that we see over and over again with these manipulative, abusive cult leaders, basically.
He's so close to Raniere. We heard testimony today that he insisted that women be hairless. Where did we hear that before? Keith Raniere. He was, we heard from Felicia. Oh, so let me go to Claudia Drury's cross. We heard the defense tried to make her look like a happy hooker, that she loved her prostitution work. This is the first time we heard the defense refer to it as sex work. And she said, look, that's all I had going. I told my clients that I loved my job and I was a very sexual person. And the government asked her, John, if she had told him that she was being trafficked, would that make it more likely or less likely for him to give Claudia money? And he said, of course, less likely. It had exactly the desired effect, which is more money for her, more patronage. And this was a guy who's married. He seems to have a prostitution problem. That was the impression I got. But he was really thinking he was getting a discount, that if she went to jail, he was already getting a discounted rate. And if Claudia went to jail, that would end her ability to pay him back.
And wasn't there some kind of list that ultimately we don't have access to at this point, but was it a client list of Claudia's that was released not too long ago?
Released in error. And I looked at the list. There's many journalists who have seen that list. The name that I recognized on it was Lawrence Connor, who is a writer, a screenwriter. Also, he wrote for The Sopranos, Boardwalk Empire, if that's the same Lawrence Connor with a K. There's seems to be only one in New York, but maybe there's another one. And his daughter went to Sarah Lawrence, ironically. So, and also was the showrunner for Girls. But I find the whole thing very interesting, this tension. It seems to be he taught, Larry Ray, like Raniere, taught this kind of third wave feminist ideal that sexuality is empowering and sex work is empowering. But boy, is that not the impression that you get.
Yeah, I mean, he groomed all of them. We see this all the time with pornography, with showing them, pornography. Which one was it? Isabella is sort of like what you call like the Ghislaine Maxwell of the group.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's up with her?
She's facing charges. At first, she was seen as a victim. She even gave an interview saying, I fell under Lawrence Ray's influence. I mean, she's doing kind of defense that all the NXIVM other
like
defendants, right? Allison, I was under the Claire Bronfman. I was under except Claire Bronfman has never disavowed Raniere, but the ones that did said I was under his spell. So she kind of did this faux disavowing Larry Ray for the press, but then she got charged, and she's in. I would tell you the problem with this is these witnesses are so good. Santos Rosario, we had Claudia Drury today, and the day before we had Felicia Rosario, who was called Larry Ray's wife. He called both Isabella Pollok, the Maxwell figure, and Claudia Drury, his wife. And this is a Harvard-educated, Columbia University Medical School doctor, and she just I think fell apart mentally under Larry Ray. She said she couldn't groom herself. We saw her hair. She was starved, beaten by him. We saw her with videos of black eyes and being really chokeholded and pushed to the ground by Larry Ray and spoken to. Claudia Drury and Felicia got horrible treatment. Absolutely. And Isabella Pollok was seen as the ideal way to be. But the interesting thing about this that is not being explored in this trial is Larry Ray demanded that these women video they're having sex with strangers. He was very interested in them having sex with strangers. He wanted to listen on the phone when it happened, but he also insisted that they video it. Where are these videos and what happened to them?
Right, and he has that domain name business with all of their names. So
he was buying tons and tons of domain names. He sold one for $29,000. We heard testimony today, but he needed Claudia Drury. He's the ultimate cockroach, bottom feeder. And he needed, when Claudia Drury quit and ran away with the help of one of her Johns, Stuart Pilch, who has an interesting background of his own. Maybe someday I'll go into that. That's a whole nother story. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
The scumbag that is Larry Ray.
Scumbag that is. Where was all this? I mean, when Claudia Drury quit, he panicked and he went to Santos Rosario, who is Felicia's brother,
right?
And
so
got him back in the
siblings.
fold and made him make amends and it was called making repairs. But the problem with Larry Ray, and the great thing about these narcissistic, what I would consider, in my opinion, psychopaths, is they can't help but making evidence against themselves. So here Larry Ray had no bank accounts. All the money was wired to other people's accounts, but he still videoed all his abuse and all these sessions, everything except what he did to Claudia with the suffocation. But we heard from Felicia today that when they came back, that they, from 7 hours of torturing Claudia Drury and abusing her terribly, they were absolutely ecstatic and in a fantastic mood, and said that they finally really got Claudia. I mean, they choked her with a dog leash and choked her over and over again until she passed out. I mean, she really thought she was going to die that night. And I'm surprised he had the control not to do it. I think only out of self-preservation. I think had he had the opportunity to kill her without anyone knowing and the means, he would have done it. If she wasn't making so much money, of course, that's the other thing. It was key element was control and keeping her working. And when the workhorse left, he really suffered. And we heard also about where this money went to, his medical bills. And we've seen him in court. He's the best dressed defendant I've ever seen in court. And we heard about his shopping, Bergdorf Goodman's, Loro Piana, Ralph Lauren. Those were the all the best things.
In the book that Daniel Levin writes, Larry talks about going to Ralph Lauren as a religious experience. And I'm wondering if they did all that to Claudia so that she would find clarity, because that's what he was peddling to these kids, is that if you do all the things that I'm telling you to do, you're going to better yourself and you're going to find clarity, like handing them Bertrand Russell and all these philosophers that he sort of bought into. I think it's kind of fascinating the way that he was able to manipulate these kids to come in and sound like this voice of authority, to convince them all that they had bad childhoods, to convince them all that they were somehow suicidal. I know some of them had prior mental issues, but going back to Claudia really quick, before he was pimping her out to like strangers, basically he would make these kids have sex with each other. There's a story that Levin tells in this book where they weren't studying together abroad, but they were both in England at the same time. And the word from Larry was to go have sex in public. And that was what they were supposed to go do. And they did it because it's what Larry told them to do. And I think, it's again, this grooming of these children, these kids. It's very, and why would Sarah Lawrence have not just him, but there was another man that lived with them in this dorm. Like we were talking about it, like, where's the RA? Like, what is going on? You can't even have a cat at Sarah Lawrence, but an adult male somehow slipped through their security cracks. Like, what is that all about?
because Sarah Lawrence is so close to the city and so pleasant campus, when I was there was a big crackdown on ever having anyone live with you. And I knew many people tried to sneak in people and kicked out. Same thing with cats and dogs. People tried to sneak in their cat or sneak in a cat or a kitten, and within a couple of days, it would be gone. So I don't understand. There's been evidence that a dean, so when Claudia Drury had a nervous breakdown that was really done by Larry Ray. He told her what to say. He told her that she was having fantasies of killing other students and her hurting other students, killing other students. Same exactly how he did it with Santos Rosario. So she got herself committed on Larry Ray's direction with Larry Ray on the phone, telling her what to say. And she got herself back into Sarah Lawrence. Larry Ray helped her write this letter to the dean. And the letter was all about Larry Ray. Another faculty member, Nancy Franklin, in a moment of clarity, Claudia Drury confessed to her and told her that she was worried that her relationship with Larry Ray wasn't healthy. And even his age, 52 at that point, maybe a little younger, even the age disparity, that alone should have set off alarm bells. And I would hope that some of these parents sue the pants off of Sarah Lawrence because they have a very good case of negligence.
It's crazy to me that this was able to happen. But then you think about the type of housing that they were in, which is described as sort of its own house, and each of them had their own room. And I guess Larry and Ivan, who is a military friend, acquaintance, have no idea how these two know each other, basically went in. It was like the first day they showed up with him and Chen, who is the owner of this apartment they lived in Manhattan later, and Ivan, some military kid, some ex-Marine, they said. And you have to wonder where the heck Ivan came from. But anyway, these two grown men, Ivan and Larry Ray, were in there staying in this housing of Sarah Lawrence. And I just think it's so negligent.
I talked to another alumnus, and this is yesterday. Felicia Rosario gave her testimony, and she was just bearing Larry Ray. Even when she was cross-examined, her cross-examination ended up being turned into a direct examination by the government. It was just devastating to Larry Ray. And we saw him making noise, and he's sitting there in his cream-colored cashmere sweater, and his lawyer's telling him to stop. He's trying to distract the jury is what I thought he was doing. But the gentleman next to me, who was Sarah Lawrence alumnus, said he saw him tearing up watching the video. And I would think what I took that as, if that's what happened, is that he's, again, trying to manipulate the jury. But he is toast. So even if you don't believe any of these witnesses, which all repeating the same stories, telling it in the same way, even if you don't believe them, then you have the video evidence, then you have the audio evidence, then you have the financial evidence, which is what's coming up. So
yeah, I want to know where
the closing arguments are Monday. They're not putting on a defense, which is what I thought they would do. I don't know who they would call besides Elizabeth Loftus at this point, but we did hear very interesting testimony that he thought that he was doing a project with all these kids and he was going to write a book about his great theories.
Yeah, social experiment.
And he was very influenced by encounter groups, exactly what I said, of Synanon, that kind of attack,
right? Because there were
all this troubled teen stuff that came out from Synanon.
Yeah, because these were because these were trouble, what I would call like struggle sessions or confession sessions. We see, this is one of the hallmarks of the called emotional blackmail, or just regular old blackmail, where you get someone to admit, even if it isn't true. I mean, you hear it all the time in this book where Dan is saying, like, I don't even think that was true, but I was just saying what Larry wanted me to say so that maybe he would lighten up or leave me alone. Like, it's just it has all the hallmarks of a cult, a sex cult, and and then there's the pimping and the prostitution. So Claudia, and then you said Felicia, is it Felicia, was not
Felicia, yeah.
Felicia was not able to really do it. She couldn't go there. She was the one that went to Columbia, that was she's a doctor, right? But she doesn't practice now, probably because of Larry Ray breaking her spirit.
Just the courage it takes for these witnesses to testify in front of Larry Ray, who's constantly trying to make eye contact with them, is remarkable in this. And there's an FBI agent who is the same FBI agent in the Maxwell case who escorts them. Kelly McGuire, Special Agent Kelly McGuire, escorts them to the witness stand, to court every morning, and they're guarded by FBI agents in the special witness room. And we heard today testimony from Larry Ray's father on audio. He was there the first day. I mean, I knew immediately who he was.
And this is the house where they sent the kids to do like manual labor, right? The dad.
That's the stepfather. This is his real father. So that's different. It's very confusing.
This is his
real father, right? His wife his mother remarried to Gordon Ray. This is Mr. Greco. He also had that. Remember, Larry Ray has the Larry Greco alias. That's where that comes from. This is his Poppy Greco, and we heard him when Felicia. He was very nervous that Felicia was talking to the government, which she was, and she taped this conversation because she was worried for her life. And we heard his father say, "I'm 82" on tape to Felicia. "I'm 82. What you are with Larry for life. And if you've betrayed him, I'm 82. Basically he's saying, I don't mind whatever they're going to do to me, put me in prison. I'm 82. What are they going to do?" Basically threatening her life in a not so subtle way. So yeah, it's absolutely wild. And he showed up
did Larry's relationship with his mother come up at all?
No, but obviously they did get some testimony, some reference to Larry Ray being a pedophile out, but we were talking beforehand. He's got a very weird relationship with his daughter.
What is it they call each other? Like Honey Boy or Honey?
He's called Honey Boy. He's also called Honey Bunny by Felicia, but he kicked her to the curb and basically made her sleep on the couch while he slept in the bed with Isabella. And he told her that there was nothing sexual going on. But it's so much like Keith Raniere.
I mean,
nothing
he used
sexual
to sleep in the
on.
bed. He used to sleep in. So I want to go to the apartment too in Manhattan because it just sounds like terrifying. It's so small. First, it's filled with all of these boxes. And then they sort of move the boxes to storage, and then it becomes this never-ending remodeling project.
Mm-hmm.
And Chen, the guy who owns the place, I guess, it took him forever to evict them.
But that's interesting because that's exactly what they did in North Carolina. Is none of those projects, when you're doing any kind of heavy physical, it's very important that you finish something just psychologically, any project. But he would let them finish it, right?
And then he would blame them for not. Oh, they're so chaotic, and they have so many inner demons that they can't finish my simple remodeling. But it was all him. It was all because of the manipulation of holding. He would say that they purposely sabotaged.
Sabotage was the big word in this. Yeah, they sabotaged. Needed to make repairs. They feel and everything was. This is a very interesting con game. Everything was presented very much like NXIVM, as if it was for in your best interest. You'll feel so good when you can.
You'll get clarity.
Clarity. Keep writing this. With Santos Rosario, he insisted keep writing this professor over and over again with his confessions, and he'd feel really good with just one more until this professor alerted the administration and he got put on medical leave and he never came back. It was so humiliating.
And
to
so
have that kind
Santos
of-
is part of 3 siblings that sort of got sucked into this cult. It's Santos, Felicia,
and
who-
Ulyssia.
right, who I
Mhm.
haven't heard that much about yet. But I didn't finish this book. I almost did. I wanted to before this, but a fascinating read. Fascinating to have some insight on how he would manipulate these kids with. Just you're sabotaging the equipment. Like he told Dan, this guy who wrote the book, that he was going to kill him over a bent oven. And he even had, I think it was Isabella, cover the bathtub in the apartment with plastic and threatened to have
like
him
Dexter.
murdered. Yeah.
Put down the plastic. All that kind of stuff. I'm going to break. But he was so violent that it wasn't hard to make that imaginative step. So we saw him abuse Dan Levin with a hammer, with pliers. He made a device and put it around his genitals and pulled at it. I mean, he was so violent with these kids. He's up there with the most disturbed predators.
Yeah, you
I've
said
ever
you
covered.
reminded him. He reminded you of Charlie Manson.
Sure, but I think Charlie Manson might be better. Might be by a smidge. I really don't. I mean, this is the most. It's really hard to sit in court and look at his neck fat and look at him. I mean, he's got a huge legal team. He's being represented by court-appointed lawyers that are fan-freaking-tastic. I think the weakest one is Maren Lennox, who's been doing the cross-examinations. I don't know why she was been given the cross-examinations. She reminds me. It looks like, you know, when you have those dreams of being in a play and you didn't learn your lines. That's what it looks like sometimes up at the when she's cross-examining witnesses. She gets her questions challenged by the government, and she doesn't know what grounds she's presenting evidence on. She just looks frustrated, and I don't know how experienced she is, but she's been definitely the weak point. But Mr. Kelly, Mr. Glasshauser, fantastic lawyers, and then they have people in the front row who are, it looks like, always talking to them. And looks like they're part of their support team, but not somehow.
Right.
But not actually trying the case. So it's really hard to look at how much support this predator psychopath is getting compared to the government.
Right. And
but
the financial stuff is going to come up tomorrow, but we're thinking that most of the money came from him pimping these women out.
It's there to prove that it's for the tax evasion stuff. We also are going to hear from the GoDaddy stuff about the domains. It's really what I would consider the more boring. It may not be boring, but to me, it sounds.
I mean, it's kind of interesting only because he's driving these kids around in a limo.
He's not driving. He doesn't drive.
Right.
He gets driven.
But he's having these kids picked up in a limo. He love bombs them like we see in all cults, and then, you know, does the emotional blackmail. But the kids, they think like, oh, this guy has so much power and wealth, right? Because he's taking them out to these very expensive dinners, but there was always this fear factor, right? Whether or not Larry was going to actually pay. And he would sort of fake Dan out. You know, I have more, you're going to the trial, I'm reading this book, but basically, what Dan was like, we never knew if he was actually going to pay or tell us that we owed him, because, you know, we couldn't obviously as college students afford like fancy French restaurant dinners, or it's such a crazy story to me. And it's so indicative of like really any cult that you read about, where the sexual blackmail, the emotional blackmail, the implanting of, you know, leftists would love this, the false memory.
But, you know, the defense's theory is that they were all storytellers who got involved in all became part of a mass delusion, which is partially true. To me, it's the best defense I could ever think of. It's not a false memory. It's basically like a madness of a group defense. But the problem with that is all the threats. He threatened these kids. If they didn't do with physical violence, with ruining their reputations, he had ClaudiaDrury.com where he had his Claudia Drury's false confession to poisoning him up there, that video, some of her information about her clients. That's the problem with their defense. But this is top. This is an exciting trial, fascinating trial, but some of the best lawyering I've ever seen in a trial on both sides. Just fantastic lawyering arguments. I can't wait to the closing arguments. That'll be Monday, and I'd be interested to see. The jury has been really attentive, very diverse jury. I'm really curious to see how long they take. I can't, I keep thinking about OJ. Now, we thought that was a lock, but I can't see how he's going to walk on any of these charges. Felicia Rosario, any doubt, I think Felicia Rosario's testimony buried him.
So why was it so devastating? What was so devastating about Felicia's testimony?
She's a wonderful witness. She's willing to admit that when one thing in Cross, they asked her, well, the money always came to you. And she said, yes, but it was Larry's money. And we had seen evidence by the government that she was forced to write these little cards with the money that she had been given, how every dime was accounted for and given to Larry. And she had to change the wording. Instead of, she said, I have to pay Larry back. And I think she changed it to, I want to pay Larry back to make repairs or whatever.
So how many?
But she never did, really. She asked her friends for money, but she never did. She was always considered too crazy or too out there, but she really, really suffered. And I wonder if this article hadn't been written and Larry Ray hadn't been arrested, we can really thank the New York Magazine writers, James and Ezra, for this prosecution. But had he not, I wonder if he would have gotten Felicia out there, because he was really desperate.
How many of them was he pimping? It was Claudia,
and I wonder about Isabella, because she had this bag of sex toys, including this giant dildo. I mean, she was described as very sexual, but she went with Claudia into the projects and made this sex tape with these strangers in the projects. I mean, it really sounds like a porno film, but apparently it happened. But I wonder, I really think he was selling this stuff. Or was it just blackmail? I mean, in that way, was he holding all this for blackmail? But to me, he was so different than Ranieri, in that Ranieri his power and control was his main thing. Larry Ray, same thing, but he loved money and he wanted to get, and he needed it. He's a convict. I mean, but he knew people. We heard today testimony from Felicia that he took her to DC and introduced her to all his cop friends and high profile people. And
what's his relationship? What was he? Well, how did he meet Gorbachev at one point? It's all very weird, and I guess they haven't really gone into his past so much, which is interesting, because he seems to be, he's like that guy in the picture that's always in the background, that's kind of there. You know what I mean? You wouldn't know who he is, but he's always there in the picture. And you find Larry at these really strange situations, like driving, I guess, someone to meet Gorbachev or something like this. And you have to wonder what he was involved in, not just it seemed like he had some connections to intelligence.
Possibly. He had tons of articles on his computer all about mind control. And
let me see if I can find the brainwashing quote.
Brainwashing, catatonic states and cold settings was one of them. I mean, that's not a complete title. I'd have to go through my notes to find a complete title, but that kind of thing. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
So Yeah, we have some kind of boring witnesses. I might miss some of it tomorrow, maybe all of it. Keith had all the money he needed. Thank you, Toni. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
He
But
had a lot of people taking care of him for sure.
his
Yeah.
outfits are so different than Keith was given these kind of polyester, Menendez colored, pastel colored V-neck sweaters to wear. I mean, this guy is coming in some designer cashmere sweaters. You can just tell by the way they kind of wrinkle up in the back and the way they fit.
He's obsessed with
everything.
cashmere, according to this book. This is
Yeah, I didn't know that.
It's his fabric of choice, apparently, and it comes
Wow.
in colors that you wouldn't believe, because that's the real tell of a designer item, is a specific and unique color. And he actually, which really funny, we kind of discussed this. He believed that wearing loud colors would basically signal to people that you were strong in your femininity or your masculinity. So it's very funny to me what you said, that you've been wearing all these bright colors, and I'm really wondering if it's like screwing with his psyche in some way. Just a little bit.
I've been wearing, I started this habit in the Maxwell trial. This is my, I'm cat sitting. This is my true crime support cat, Tito. I'm cat sitting for my bestest girlfriend right now. So I've been wearing all these. I started in the Maxwell trial wearing like super bright colors to just kind of keep my spirits up and to communicate that I was excited about Maxwell getting convicted. And same thing here. I'm the only one. I think the only one that I remember in the courtroom in these kind of colors. Everyone else is in black and gray. Dressed for New York Mag, but he returned all the clothes after that photo shoot. Yeah, this guy is dressed to the nines, but he's so much like Keith Raniere. And I wonder if he'll go to the same prison, and I wonder if he's going to be in a sex offenders area like Keith Raniere in prison.
Now, what is his connection to this? Was he a police commissioner? Bernie
Herrick, yes, and he and Larry Ray testified against him and helped bring him down. So, and then, but he was pardoned by Trump, by the way.
So he used this story of this incident to tell all these kids that basically he was being persecuted by the state, and everyone was out to get him. There's such a conspiratorial mindset here that I also find kind of interesting.
You know, we had something released by accident in the Maxwell case, and everyone was saying, oh, that's released on purpose, or the government's trying not to lose on purpose, or those kind of things. But here we have it again, a document released by accident. I mean, crap happens. I don't know. I think what's more interesting in this is how this guy convinced everybody in Sloanham 9 to become his devotees. That's a good con man. I mean, it seemed like there wasn't anyone who wasn't susceptible to his charms. And we heard from Felicia that she found him charming and nice. And boy, is that the opposite impression than what he really is.
When I read this book, I'm terrified of this man. I'm like, I'd like to think that I wouldn't be so easily manipulated by this guy. But if you think about these kids going off to school and they're experiencing parts of life that are new to them and they're very vulnerable, I mean, he must have seen them as some kind of cash cow, because a few of them came from, I'd say, like upper middle class backgrounds. The girls from California, Claudia and
Santos Rosario got a great scholar. He was on scholarship package to Sarah Lawrence, but these are Sarah Lawrence is a very interested type of student, unconventional, interested. How did he lure them in? By I think this trial is really like all the lonely people trial. So whether we're talking about the Johns, intense loneliness, he found the damaged part of you and said he could fix you. That's how he seduced them. And he listened. He did exactly what Keith did so well, which is he listened. But what these predators listen for is to find your weaknesses and your vulnerabilities so they can exploit you and get what they want. But they're really good listeners. And I think most of us have this kind of daddy hole, mommy hole, these unresolved relationships with our parents, or a need for love and attention and to be listened to, especially women. And he zoned right in on that.
Yeah, so about brainwashing, I'll just read this quote from Dan Levin's book here. A quote, "People are so negative about the word brainwashing," Larry said. "I don't see what's wrong with it. That is what I'm doing. I'm washing your brains. You should tell your dad that, Daniel." Oh, right. So he also gave them all nicknames. They had no choice.
New cult names.
Right.
Red flag number 57. Right.
Right. He said laughing, and Isabella laughed with him. Santos piped up from across the room, "I would welcome some brainwashing."
Mm-hmm.
I kept looking at the frying pan where it sat on the glass table. Okay. And this is where basically he had this. The scene before this was where he had screamed at Dan saying, "You scratched this pan." And I'm writing in notes in the margins like, if it's a stainless steel pan, you can't scratch it, but okay. Like, it's all so bizarre. Yeah. But I think to lure them in, yes, he played a father figure. He played a role of someone that would listen to all your problems. And these kids are a little naive. And so they think, well, here's this person who genuinely cares, who wants to listen to my problems, who wants to help me. And they believe it, because I think they're just too naive to kind of know how the world works. And to see it, unless it's happened. I mean, I guess it's hard for some people to see a manipulative type in front of them if they're giving them what you want, right? If they're giving you what you want, which is someone to listen, someone to understand you. And I love, it was all about clarity. And it's a lot of new age stuff. It all seems like recycled stuff that you'd hear really any cult leader.
We were talking beforehand about Sarah Lawrence not knowing, but I mean, this is like if you had a bunch of kittens and you put a fox in with them, or some kind of coyote in with. I mean, at that age, you want to have these long discussions. You think that people are so different, that you're the only one to ever have these feelings and stuff. Right. And he exploited all that. I think we've done it, right? I mean, is there any questions? Please give this a like. Support my work. Thank you, Toni. You can buy me a cup of coffee, become a Patreon, get special content, and I'll be, for closing arguments, and I'll be doing, I think, somewhat of a verdict watch. I cannot imagine him getting off on any charge, but maybe we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
If justice is served, he'll be put away, I think, for quite a while. But who knows? I mean, if he's so much like Charlie Manson, he might be able to form a cult while he's in prison.
This is a good question. Was he donating money to the college? That is a very good question. Don't know. The college certainly is protecting him. They went against the alumnus, Ezra Marcus, who broke this story and said his writing was inaccurate and irresponsible. They've taken no responsibility at all. They owe Ezra Marcus an apology, and they need to make a plan as to how they're going to keep their students safe. But we did hear testimony today that Claudia's prostitution money, some of it was sent to Talia, Larry Ray's daughter, who was working for a congressional candidate in North Carolina. So
a Democrat,
right? Yeah. And she wanted to become a lawyer so she could work in justice reform. Probably work in the Innocence Project. So it's funny to hear that. I don't think she has any chance. Her trial comes up in July. I hope I can will be able to go to that. I think it'll be really interesting. So stay tuned. Thanks. And subscribe to Dystopian Deep Dives.
If you want
to. Always fascinating. Leave a 5-star review on Apple and support Natalie's work because it's super unusual and in-depth and interesting.
That is weird, yeah. But also, just closing, if anyone is interested, I think this book is really illuminating as to what was going on with these kids and how he manipulated them emotionally and sexually. The sex part is, I think, one of the most important components.
Is Dan Levin giving you any money for promoting his book or no?
No.
It's called Slonim 9. Slonim Woods 9? Is it Slonim 9?
Slonim Woods 9.
Name of
no. I just
house.
Thought it would be appropriate to read before we did this, and maybe we'll do a podcast about it. I don't know if we will, but we'll see. And I love that you're actually attending these court cases. Like, I don't know anyone else that does that. So, thank you for that, for sure. Because I think it provides a perspective that, we don't often get.
Thank you. My pleasure. All right. Have a great week, everybody. See you back next time.
Bye.